Yesterday, it was revealed that Elon Musk bought 9.2% of Twitter, sending the stock sky high. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But before that news was revealed, Elon Musk took to Twitter, which he uses better than most, to conduct a poll. He said, "Free speech is essential to a functioning democracy. Do you believe Twitter rigorously adheres to this principle?" And 70% of people said no. And then he said, given that Twitter serves as the de facto public town square, failing to adhere to free speech principles fundamentally undermines democracy. What should be done? Well, he obviously had in mind what he ought to be done. Well, today, news came that far from the passive role that was originally and somewhat strangely reported yesterday. I don't know how you can be a passive investor when you're the number one investor in a company with voting shares. It was announced that, in fact, Elon Musk would have a board seat at Twitter, which means he'd be able to get deep into the details, and ask questions, and look through the financials, and maybe take a peek at that algorithm that seems to suppress conservatives. You saw that Elon Musk framed his acquisition in terms of free speech. Well, here's how Bloomberg.com wrote it. I just can't get enough of this. Elon Musk's Twitter investment could be bad news for free speech. I'm sorry, I couldn't read that without laughing. He's a free speech absolutist. And Bloomberg says this is going to be bad for free speech. And they say the Tesla founder's decision suggests that he wants to bring the social media platform to heel. Really? To heel. That's as if Twitter is his target. I think it's sort of the opposite. He wants to rein in the censors at Twitter, bring the censors at Twitter to heel, to let people do the talking. I'm not sure if that's why Twitter's stock price soared. If they just thought, well, here's a rich guy buying shares, he might want to acquire the whole thing. It's just a strictly financial reason to buy. Or do people say, you know what? It's not just that you've got a new investor with fresh ideas. He wants to bring Twitter back to the good old days of free speech, and that unlocks value. I don't know. Well, Elon Musk himself read the article above, and he said, Washington Post, always good for a laugh. But here's a good point. And I saw this from an investor who was talking about political activism, not just by social media companies, but the recent quarrel between Walt Disney, Disney World, and Ron DeSantis. Disney, one of the largest employers in Florida, Ron DeSantis, the very successful governor there, who recently brought in a bill that stops teachers from teaching sexuality of any sort. There's no reference to heterosexuality or homosexuality. It's just no sexuality can be taught in Florida schools in grades kindergarten through grade 3. Now, you're probably shocked and thinking, were they teaching sex in kindergarten and grades 1, 2, and 3? Yes, they most certainly were. And if you don't think that's happening in Canada, you're not paying attention to the curriculum. So Ron DeSantis passed this. He was a big supporter of this law. It was labeled by the Democrats as "don't say gay," which, of course, the word gay or homosexual or heterosexual didn't appear at all. And it's just don't talk about sexuality or gender to children of tender years. But the Democrats had a big campaign saying that Ron DeSantis was a homophobe. And for some reason, Disney, perhaps because it has big operations in Florida, the cruise ships and Disney World, Disney got more and more involved. And here's a tweet by an investor who says, Disney CEO Bob Chapek appeared to bend the knee to a small group of radical employees, but the real problem runs deeper. His top 3 shareholders, they represent a $20 trillion cartel that pushes companies to advance political agendas, and they're using your money to do it. I'd like to show you a clip, and just by the way, ESG stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance. Take a quick look at this video by Vivek Ramaswamy.
Yeah, so let me give you some insight. And this may actually even be confusing to a lot of people who see Disney doing business in countries ranging from Japan to cruise lines going to islands in the Caribbean where gay marriage is banned, where they don't say a peep. Why is that? So a lot of people look at this situation and think that CEO Bob Chapek was bending the knee to 20 employees who complained about him and are confused about why he's doing it. There's a quieter undercurrent here too, Will. If you look at who are the top shareholders of Disney, it is BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard, the three largest asset managers in the United States, who collectively manage over $20 trillion, by the way. That's more than the GDP of the United States, who are the shareholders, technically the bosses of the CEOs, who quietly tell them that exactly these are the kinds of social agendas that they want to see them pushing. So actually, if you're a CEO in a public company today, you find yourself sandwiched not just between your progressive woke employees and people who on the outside wonder why are they bending the knee to them. It's that when you look at your alleged bosses, the quote-unquote shareholders, they're actually quietly whispering in your ear that they want to see you doing the same things too. So it runs far deeper and it's far more complicated. But the problem, Will, and you know this well, is that those shareholders aren't the actual shareholders. They're actually the everyday citizens of this country who entrust those institutions with their money. But those institutions, I think, are betraying their true clients by telling these companies, Disney, Nike, Airbnb, et cetera, that you got to actually behave this way.
That's what we have to do next.
It's a complicated equation.
So that's him talking about Disney. That sure, you might have some Disney employee activists, but is that what's really motivating Walt Disney to go to war with Ron DeSantis, a handful of rambunctious employees? Here's the next tweet by Vivek. He says, "This is why I like what Elon Musk did today. We need more actual shareholders to compete at scale with the ESG-linked asset management cartel. That is the single greatest lever to drive cultural change." So do you see what he's saying? Is that the people who are pushing for radical changes in society, whether it's trans or education in kindergarten, or whether it's censorship in the name of wokeness, sure, it's individual employee activists, but it's these huge investors behind the scenes. That's an excerpt from my daily show, The Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.